For centuries, we have asked the same question. But what if we are asking it wrong?
Some people believe the greatest mystery of the Mona Lisa is her smile. They imagine hidden emotions, secret romances, or coded messages concealed behind lips that seem to change every time you look away. For more than 500 years, millions have stood in silence before this small portrait, convinced that somewhere inside that expression lies a secret waiting to be uncovered. But what if generations have been asking the wrong question? Because the smile isn't the greatest mystery at all. The real mystery is why Leonardo da Vinci refused to let the painting go. He carried it with him for nearly 16 years, crossing mountains and kingdoms, continuing to alter it long after the woman who inspired it had likely disappeared from his life. He never delivered it to the man who probably commissioned it. He never stopped working on it. And when he died in France in 1519, the portrait was still by his side. Why would the most celebrated artist of the Renaissance spend years obsessing over a single painting that wasn't even considered his greatest masterpiece during his lifetime? The answer leads far beyond one mysterious smile. It leads into a world of political intrigue, scientific obsession, artistic revolution, and one man whose endless pursuit of perfection may have transformed an ordinary portrait into history's most famous work of art. And the deeper historians have looked, the stranger the story has become. To understand why, we have to leave behind the crowded halls of the Louvre and travel back to a Florence unlike anything we know today. The year is around 1503. Europe is changing faster than anyone can fully understand. Ancient knowledge is being rediscovered. Printing presses are spreading ideas across continents. Powerful families compete not only through war, but through art, architecture, and innovation. Cities rise in wealth while kingdoms struggle for dominance, and nowhere captures this transformation more completely than Florence. The city is alive with possibility. Merchants bargain beneath towering stone palaces. Goldsmiths hammer precious metals into intricate jewelry. Apprentices grind colorful minerals into brilliant pigments inside crowded workshops. Church bells echo through narrow streets where philosophers debate alongside bankers, engineers, and poets. This is not merely a city, it is the beating heart of the Renaissance. Florence has become a place where talent can change a person's destiny. Wealthy patrons compete to hire the greatest painters and sculptors, believing magnificent works of art reflect not only personal prestige, but divine favor. Every commission is more than decoration. It is a declaration of power. Yet beneath this beauty lies constant uncertainty. Political alliances shift almost overnight. Rival families battle for influence. Religious leaders question luxury, while merchants grow richer than kings. The city celebrates human achievement, even as it fears divine judgment. It is a world balanced delicately between faith and ambition. Into this extraordinary moment steps a man who seems almost impossible to define. Leonardo da Vinci is already famous, but not because he finishes many paintings. He is an engineer, designing machines centuries ahead of their time. He studies anatomy by dissecting human bodies under the cover of darkness. He sketches flying devices inspired by birds, imagines armored vehicles, designs canals, and fills notebooks with questions about everything from flowing water to the movement of light across a human face. To Leonardo, the entire universe is connected. Painting is not separate from science. Science is not separate from nature. Nature is not separate from mathematics. Everything follows hidden laws, and if he can discover those laws, perhaps he can paint reality itself. That belief makes him unlike any other artist of his generation. While many painters focus on pleasing wealthy patrons, Leonardo becomes obsessed with understanding how people actually see the world. He notices that distant mountains appear blue because of the atmosphere. He studies how muscles beneath the skin create expressions. He watches rivers carve landscapes and clouds scatter sunlight. For him, every observation is another piece of an enormous puzzle. And then, sometime around 1503, another puzzle arrives. According to the most widely accepted historical account, a prosperous Florentine silk merchant named Francesco del Giocondo commissions a portrait of his wife, Lisa Gherardini. At first glance, nothing about the request seems extraordinary. Portraits are common among wealthy families eager to celebrate marriages, financial success, or the birth of children. Lisa herself appears to have lived a respectable but relatively ordinary life within Florence's merchant class. She's not a queen. She's not a noblewoman whose political influence shaped kingdoms. She is simply the wife of a successful businessman. Which raises a fascinating question. How did a portrait of an ordinary woman become the most famous painting on Earth? The answer, surprisingly, may have very little to do with Lisa herself. Historians generally agree that Lisa Gherardini is the sitter, supported by documentary evidence discovered centuries later. Yet, even with that evidence, debates continue over Leonardo's intentions. Some scholars suggest he saw this commission as something much larger than a simple likeness. Others believe it became an ongoing experiment, a painting that gradually transformed into a laboratory for every artistic idea he wanted to test. If that's true, then Lisa wasn't merely a subject. She became part of Leonardo's greatest experiment, and experiments, by their nature, are rarely finished. Leonardo approaches portraiture differently from everyone else. Most artists begin with clear outlines, filling them with crisp details that define every feature. Leonardo instead allows forms to emerge gradually from shadow, almost as though the figure is being born from light itself. He develops a technique now known as sfumato, from the Italian word for smoky. There are no harsh edges, no obvious brushstrokes. Transitions become almost invisible. The corners of the mouth soften into shadow, the eyes blur delicately into surrounding skin. Every surface appears alive, changing subtly depending on the angle of the light and the viewer's own position. Centuries later, scientists would discover that this extraordinary effect tricks the human visual system. When you look directly at the mouth, the smile seems restrained. When you shift your gaze toward the eyes, your peripheral vision interprets the shadows differently, making the smile appear broader and warmer. The expression itself never changes. Your brain does. It feels almost magical. But Leonardo would likely have called it observation. He understood something remarkable long before modern neuroscience, that human perception is never fixed. We do not simply see, we interpret. And nowhere is that more evident than in the Mona Lisa. Yet the smile, astonishing as it is, represents only one layer of Leonardo's obsession. He spends extraordinary amounts of time studying hands, fabrics, landscapes, and the invisible atmosphere that separates every object in nature. The winding rivers behind Lisa do not resemble any single real location. Instead, they seem to combine imagination with geological observation, creating a world that feels strangely familiar and impossibly distant at the same time. Some art historians interpret this landscape as symbolic rather than literal, a vision of nature itself rather than a map of any place. Others caution that no surviving writings from Leonardo confirm such symbolism, reminding us that many interpretations remain educated speculation rather than established fact. Even so, one detail continues to intrigue researchers. The horizon behind Lisa does not line up evenly. One side appears noticeably higher than the other. Some scholars argue this subtle imbalance creates an unconscious sense of movement and instability, making the viewer feel that something is quietly shifting beneath the surface. Others believe the difference is simply the result of Leonardo's evolving composition over many years. Whatever the explanation, it contributes to an unsettling impression. The painting refuses to sit still. Every time you think you've understood it, another question appears. And perhaps no question is stranger than this. If Leonardo was simply completing a commission, why did he keep working on it year after year? Years passed. Other commissions came and went. Kings sought his expertise. Military leaders requested engineering designs. Rival artists competed for Florence's admiration. Younger masters, including Michelangelo and Raphael, began redefining the future of Renaissance art. Leonardo could have delivered the portrait, accepted payment, and moved on. Instead, he did something almost unheard of. He kept it, not for months, not for a year, for more than a decade. Wherever Leonardo traveled, the painting traveled with him. As Florence changed around him and political fortunes rose and fell, Lisa's portrait remained close at hand, evolving almost like a living companion. The longer historians examined this decision, the more puzzling it became. Because if the Mona Lisa truly belonged to a client, why was it still in Leonardo's possession when he left Italy forever? The answer would take us beyond Florence, across the Alps, into the final years of Leonardo's extraordinary life, and what happened next would transform an unfinished portrait into an immortal legend. Leonardo's departure from Florence did not look like the triumphant finale one might expect for the greatest artist of the Renaissance. By the second decade of the 16th century, Italy was no longer simply a land of brilliant ideas and flourishing art. It had become a battlefield. Powerful kingdoms fought for control of the peninsula. French armies marched south. Spanish forces answered with campaigns of their own. City-states shifted alliances in desperate attempts to survive. The Renaissance was reaching extraordinary artistic heights, but beneath its beauty was constant instability. Leonardo was now in his 60s. His reputation had spread across Europe. Yet, many of his grandest projects remained unfinished. Monumental sculptures had never been cast. Engineering plans existed only on paper. Frescoes had deteriorated almost as quickly as they were completed because he constantly experimented with untested techniques. To some patrons, he was a genius. To others, he was frustratingly impossible because Leonardo was never satisfied. Every finished work revealed another problem waiting to be solved. Every answer created another question. That relentless pursuit of perfection shaped every part of his life, and nowhere was it more obvious than in the portrait he still refused to release. Then, in 1516, everything changed. King Francis I of France, only in his early 20s, invited Leonardo to his court. Francis admired Italian culture with extraordinary passion. He dreamed of turning France into the new center of Renaissance, learning. Rather than conquering genius through war, he wanted to attract it through admiration. Leonardo accepted, crossing the Alps with a small group of assistants, notebooks, scientific sketches, and several treasured paintings. He left Italy behind forever. Among the works packed for that journey was the Mona Lisa. Not a copy, not a sketch, the original. It is one of the most remarkable facts in art history. A portrait that may have begun as a merchant's commission was now traveling hundreds of miles with its creator, more than a decade after it had supposedly been painted. Why? No surviving letter gives us a definitive answer. Instead, historians have pieced together several possibilities. The first, and perhaps the simplest, is that Leonardo never believed the painting was truly finished. This fits everything we know about him. His notebooks reveal a mind incapable of accepting completion. He constantly revised observations, corrected drawings, and returned to old ideas years later. To Leonardo, perfection wasn't a destination. It was a horizon that moved every time he approached it. If the Mona Lisa represented his greatest experiment in capturing life itself, then perhaps he simply couldn't stop improving it. But another theory is even more fascinating. Some scholars believe the portrait had become something entirely different from the commission it originally was. Instead of belonging emotionally to a client, it had become Leonardo's personal demonstration of everything he had learned about painting, his understanding of anatomy, his study of light, his discoveries about atmosphere, his observations of human psychology, his revolutionary use of color and shadow. The Mona Lisa was no longer just Lisa Gherardini. It was Leonardo's philosophy on a wooden panel. If that interpretation is correct, selling it would have been like handing away years of scientific research, and perhaps that explains why he guarded it so carefully. Yet another mystery was quietly unfolding. By now, other artists had begun to notice something unusual. Young painters visited Leonardo's workshop. Some made copies of the portrait while it was still unfinished. These copies are surprisingly important today because they preserve details that have faded or changed over 5 centuries. One early version even shows decorative columns framing the figure, features that are missing from the original today. Were they trimmed away? Did the panel once have a wider composition, or were the copies inaccurate? Experts still debate the answer. Each possibility changes how we imagine Leonardo's original vision. The painting, it seemed, was keeping secrets even before it became famous. Meanwhile, Leonardo himself was slowing down. Years of relentless work had taken a physical toll. Evidence suggests he suffered paralysis affecting his right hand, although he was naturally left-handed and may still have been able to draw and supervise work with his dominant hand. His assistants increasingly helped execute projects, but his mind remained astonishingly active. Visitors described conversations that wandered effortlessly between astronomy, engineering, anatomy, philosophy, architecture, and painting. He seemed less interested in fame than in understanding how the universe worked. The Mona Lisa remained close, almost like a trusted companion, almost like unfinished business. Then came 1519. Inside the Château de Clos-Lucé in France, Leonardo da Vinci died at the age of 67. According to historical records, many of his possessions passed to his devoted pupil and assistant, Francesco Melzi. But some of his most treasured paintings, including the Mona Lisa, entered the orbit of the French royal collection, likely through arrangements involving King Francis I. And with Leonardo's death, the portrait entered a completely new chapter. One mystery had ended, another was only beginning. Because for centuries afterward, the Mona Lisa was admired, but not worshipped. This surprises many people today. We imagine the painting becoming instantly legendary the moment Leonardo finished it. History tells a different story. It certainly impressed artists. It influenced portrait painting across Europe. Perhaps that is the rarest achievement any work of art can accomplish. So, the next time you see that famous smile, remember this. This is the expression may have made the Mona Lisa unforgettable, but it was one man's lifelong obsession with understanding the world that made her immortal. Now, we'd love to hear your thoughts. If you could ask Leonardo da Vinci a single question about the Mona Lisa and be guaranteed an honest answer, what would you ask him? Would you ask about the smile, the identity of Lisa, the years he spent refining the painting, or a mystery historians haven't even thought to solve? Share your answer in the comments, because the next great discovery often begins with a single question.